I probably owe you an explanation for the lack of a hottest trash video this spring. Believe me, it wasn't for lack of potential content, but there was just so much great anime on at the same time that I couldn't even think about anything that wasn't Odd Taxi, Vivi 86, Odd Taxi, Mars Red, Odd Taxi, Nomad Megalobox 2, Odd Taxi, or Odd Taxi. I won't apologize for hyping those up or for the kidnappings, but I will apologize for not simultaneously cluing you in to the pungent delights of Fairy Ranmaru, Cestus, Blue Reflection Ray, and especially Osomake, the rom-com where the childhood friend absolutely will not lose. Nothing quite as exquisite as X-Arm, of course, but a fine seasonal selection nonetheless that I, as a trained trash sommelier, was remiss in neglecting to review. Sadly, the moment has passed, and the summer heat now beats down on newer, smellier, more exciting mounds of refuse in various states of immolation, so we too must move on to browner pastures. I may return to cover some or all of spring's garbage next month if there's interest in that, but for now, this is the hottest trash of summer 2021, rated, as always, on an intuitive, highly scientific scale of garbage quantity and burniness. To help you understand how that all works, let's set a baseline with a familiar breed of trash: video game adaptations. Translating interactive stories to non-interactive media is notoriously difficult, and almost everyone fucks it up. But Pokémon made all the money that one time, and anime has never stopped trying since. Scarlet Nexus, a solid new cyberpunk action RPG from the team behind Tales of Vesperia, pushes the cross-media hype train harder than most by hiding codes for in-game rewards within the anime's episodes, which is a neat idea, only slightly hampered by the fact that the show is completely unwatchable. For starters, its action scenes are abysmal, even by video game anime standards. I'm talking South Park stiff animation set against an empty red void because I guess they ran out of background art. The few backgrounds they do have are all bland and empty, a far cry from the game's vibrant, ad-dense cityscape, and if that weren't enough to kill the vibe, the game's distinctive mix of hard J-rock and lo-fi beats has been replaced entirely with the most generic anime soundtrack I've ever heard. And to top all that off, not only does the rewritten story undermine the character relationships that are the core of the game's appeal, it also spoils plot points from several hours in at the end of episode 1. This isn't just a bad representation of Scarlet Nexus. Watching it will actively make your playthrough less enjoyable. And the writing isn't even the funny kind of bad. I give it 2 extremely damp hospital hampers full of medical waste. Okay, now that you have a perfect grasp on how these ratings work and will never need further clarification, it's time for today's ad. This video is sponsored by Konosuba Fantastic Days, a brand new mobile RPG packed with humor, explosive action, and lovable characters old and new who are sure to be useful additions to your party and Aqua. With multiple variants of each character, some with unique costumes, collectors will find plenty to enjoy here. Personally, I'm looking forward to stockpiling rare unions, but there is more to consider than just your faves. Each party member is attuned to one or more magical elements, so as the challenge ramps up, you will have to consider their strengths and weaknesses as you balance your team. Perfecting your party comp is made all the more satisfying by an intuitive blend of real-time and turn-based combat, which lets you rack up crazy damage by precisely timing your skills and buffs. Plus, each hero has a distinct, cinematically animated super skill which can turn tough matches around in an instant using, in true Konosuba fashion, massive, unnecessary explosions. Everyone is voiced by the same fantastic cast as the original anime, and they're joined by several faces from the light novel who haven't made it to the screen just yet, so if you're a reader who's wondering what Iris or Cecily sounds like, now's your chance to find out. The game features an extensive visual novel-style story that recreates the series' funniest moments in expressive live 2D animation before branching into its own plot with its own exclusive cast of characters, all of whom possess personalities, bold and memorable enough to feel right at home next to Kazuma and co. In particular, I'm excited to learn more about Axel Hearts, the new group of idle adventurers at the heart of the game's original story, but beyond them, as someone who's binged the whole anime multiple times and has been craving a new season or movie, I'm just stoked to be able to follow my favorite crew of lovable idiots on a brand new adventure. If you feel the same way, then click the link in the doobly-doo to download Konosuba Fantastic Days and start your quirkily comedic anime adventure today. Now, on that note, this wouldn't be a proper trash anime list without at least one isekai on it. Drugstore in Another World, the slow life of a cheat pharmacist is nothing if not honest in its overlong isetitling. It's about a pharmacist who's stuck in a fantasy world and runs a drugstore using cheat knowledge like how to make dishwashing detergent to make dishwashing detergent that he then sells to the medieval people who would obviously want to buy that because it's useful. Also, boy, is it ever slow. Get ready for bleeding edge recurring gags like, okay, get this. Children are annoying and they like petting animals, right? So what if they did that to one of the anime girls with the animal bits? Oh, and the pharmacist guy, he gives all the things he makes these sensible, descriptive names, but then the Ara Ara Ghost Lady secretary renames them to silly, cute things that sell better. Not doing it for you? Well, I hope you like prop comedy. I made a stinky monster repellent spray, so now my werewolf mascot thinks I didn't shower. For some reason, I made pepper spray, but ouchie, it got in my eyes. And who could forget the classic, oh no, super glue makes people sticky too. If you've always wanted to see low-effort Dragon Quest LARPers recite sitcom gags that were stale when I Love Lucy was on, you should probably be on a list, but this is the isekai for you. If not, it may still be worth watching, if only to find out what a true neutral, pure 5 out of 10 anime really looks like. Drugstore Isekai gets one standard steel trash can full of crackers, room temperature, lightly salted. There is another isekai that made this list, and I'm kinda disappointed to say that, because for a couple episodes, Seirei Gensoki Spirit Chronicles seemed like it might actually be good. The first episode did make me unintentionally burst out laughing when the reincarnated hero's question of where am I was met with swelling dramatic music, followed by an even more dramatic zoom out to the exact city that you'd expect to be there. And the edgy, grimdark twist where the peasant boy who saved the princess gets tortured by poor-phobic royal guards was about as predictable as it was hilariously overwrought. But then the story started leaning harder into exploring the dichotomy between Ryo's reincarnated memories and the person he is now. It started expanding on the magic system and the world's politics, even building decently believable relationships between Protag-kun and his peers. Yeah, it still did the thing where the comically evil spoiled rich kids make life hell for the poor kid at the Magic Knight Academy, but they can't really do shit because he's that much better than them. But that did work well enough as an excuse to get him on the road doing an adventure, and for a minute, it seemed like that adventure would get really good. There's even a bit where a beast girl slave who he frees while she's trying to assassinate him is like, "Put my magic collar back on so you can trust me," and his response is just, "No, that's really fucked up. Just throw that thing away, please." Maybe the bar for this genre's too low? Either way, it's not long before Spirit Chronicles dips back down below it. Ryo arrives at a village of beastmen that, after a tiny misunderstanding, more or less immediately decides to worship him as a god. Then there's a time skip, and when we come back, the cool assassin girl has forgotten how to assassin, while he's learned how to fly. You know, like Goku does. Also, he has a harem now. The power fantasy takes the wheel, the plot gets increasingly predictable, and the characters get decreasingly interesting in turn, especially Ryo. I can't say I'm surprised. This is exactly where the first episode made me think it was going, but the brief detour into actually decent fantasy gave me false hope, and I kinda resent it for that. I'm giving it 3 standard steel trash cans full of ReZero fanfics that were on fire until someone splashed some water in there, but not nearly enough to stop it from happening again. Another summer show I really wish I could love is D-Side Traumerai. Sanzagen's trademark Guilty Gear-esque 3D Sakuga looks the awesomest it ever has here. Seriously, these action scenes are incredible. They've come a long way since Bubuki Baranki. And the 2.5D characters in those action scenes are remarkably expressive too. Not to mention, drippy as hell in both their street clothes and their twee Nightmare World pseudo-Sentai getups. But the phrase that they use to transform into those costumes, which is also the name for what people with their superpowers are. It's, you see, what they say with their mouths very dramatically every episode, usually at the emotional climax, is I don't care how sick those transformation animations or those kicks are, there is no getting over dialogue that stupid. And sadly, that describes all the writing in this mobile game adaptation, Japanese and English alike, which wouldn't be so bad if this was just a dumb superhero show about teenagers donning magical Shibuya fits to fight cool Persona monsters of the week. But unfortunately, D-Side Traumarai also feels the need to do these monsters represent real social issues faced by real teenagers part of the Persona formula. That's why the monsters are called Traumarai, you see. And with exactly the level of writing skill and tact that suggests, Episode 2 tackles domestic violence by focusing on this quiet, nerdy girl who is quiet and nerdy because her cop dad does what 40% of cop dads do out of concern for his public image. To help advance that public image, he's decided that she's gonna marry the commissioner's son, and she can't say no because every time she talks back to him, he takes it out on her mother. To deal with this, she buys these dream supplements from a shady website, which are actually monster drugs that trigger a traumatic nightmare where puppet strings make her be the one that beats her mom up. Symbolism! Long story short, she turns into a giant robot sex mummy and tries to skewer her dad, but just in time, Genki Protag-kun shows up, and he's all like, hey, remember when you tried kickboxing for 5 minutes? That's what real strength is. And she's all like, oh, fuck right, murder's bad. Then she awakens her persona and goes to confront her dad, but not before popping over to Shibuya to buy a mesh bikini top and get piercings. Not just for the obvious visual metaphor, but also as part of a brilliant plan to record 15 seconds of him reacting to that and yelling at her mom about it out of context so she can... That'll ruin his career somehow, so he stops abusing his children. That's how that works. Thankfully, this horrendous ham-fisting of sensitive subjects is at least consistently stupid enough to be hilarious, as are most of the show's attempts to be cool, which is why I'm giving it 4 blue blazing dumpsters full of bootleg Yeezys and moonshine. Without question, the biggest disappointment of the summer, at least for me, has gotta be The Detective Is Already Dead. I love me some mysteries, especially the weird stuff, and I'd heard nothing but good things about the series of light novels on which this anime is based. ReZero even references them to establish Subaru's taste for bleach blonde waifus, so I figured they had to be good, but sadly, I think we're gonna have to add shit taste to the long list of Subaru's pre-isekai personal failings. Okay, that's not fair. I haven't read the books yet, so I can't say if they're bad or not. But I can say, with confidence, that this show had one of the top 5 worst first episodes of any anime I've ever seen. The animation and production values are pretty good, actually great even, but all that polish is wasted on an overlong, corn-riddled turd of a script that starts by ruining a cool airplane hijacking fight scene with 12 different layers of BBC Sherlock bullshit, then does a complete 180 in tone and intensity into tedious school comedy nonsense. Detective Siesta and her newly recruited middle school assistant are still ostensibly trying to solve a crime in the back half of the episode, but that crime is a school rumor about a cursed toilet stall that turns out to be a facade for a dude selling Ritalin to track and field kids who is connected to a secret evil organization somehow. A plot that the episode itself is so disinterested in pursuing that the characters just sort of wander off in the middle of chasing the villain to put on cosplay, partly so Siesta can get naked at least once before she dies. Not a spoiler, it's in the title, and partly because the show feels compelled to spell out the romantic subtext of their Sherlock and Watson partnership in the most obvious way possible. To be fair, that is apparently an anime original episode, so that's definitely not on the light novel author, but to be balanced, the next arc has more or less all the same problems of wonky pacing and unsatisfying, poorly telegraphed solutions and twists to mysteries. The dialogue also does that otaku pseudo-meta commentary thing where the characters have a self-aware quip ready for every single thing that happens to and around them, which can work in the context of text, but tends to make spoken dialogue grind to a halt. On the flip side of that, 3 episodes is pretty short for a light novel volume adaptation, so the show ends up feeling like it's simultaneously rushing through the plot and wading through molasses with the dialogue. The detective is already dead can be funny at times, both intentionally and not, so it's not a total wash, but if the books are really as good as people say, then this has gotta be one of the least successful adaptations of all time. I give it 3 lightly smoldering back alley bins full of Sherlock box sets. If you're looking for something a little or a lot less convoluted, you might find some guilty pleasure in Girlfriend Girlfriend or Kanojo mo Kanojo, which has an unusually straightforward premise for a harem anime. Naoya Mukai is finally happy now that his childhood friend Saki Saki has finally agreed to be his girlfriend, but things get complicated when their cute classmate, Minase Nagisa, confesses her feelings to him with a Michelin star-worthy bento box, after skipping school for like half a year to prepare for that confession. Sadly, Naoya's just too much of a sincere idiot to reject that kind of heartfelt effort, but luckily, he's also enough of a sincere idiot to just ask them both to move in with him. Saki's initially against the idea, but Minase's simply too adorable for the closeted bi redhead to turn down, and so the harem is established officially halfway through episode 1. While everyone in this love polygon is a certifiable moron, they're also more or less aware of their own stupidity, and thus make an active effort to communicate in order to avoid the comical misunderstandings typical of the genre and that trope. Instead, Girlfriend's comedy is rooted in ridiculous oversharing, and the kind of cringeworthy over-the-top overtures of affection that you'd expect from a man with a heart big enough for 2, possibly more, girlfriends, like buying Saki $1,000 worth of pulls in her favorite gacha game, which of course results in 0 5 stars. The humor in the early episodes is a bit hit or miss, lacking as they are in real conflict or strong, cynical personalities for the schmaltzy, lovey-dovey leads to play off of. In particular, Naoya's off-the-charts cringe emissions are hard to take without any sort of antidote, but episode 4 fixes that by introducing Hoshizaki Rika, a busty, borderline narcissistic MeTuber who is so deeply offended by the thought that a two-timing loser like him wouldn't also want to date her that she stages a protest campout in the throuple's backyard. Rika hits that Rumiko Takahashi sweet spot between lovably quirky and dangerously unhinged, aka the shampoo zone, injecting some much-needed chaotic horny energy into the show's lawful stupid status quo. Girlfriend isn't a great anime by any metric, but it is a pretty damn funny one, mostly on purpose, and makes for a very comfy sort of guilty pleasure, not unlike Winter's The Hidden Dungeon Only I Can Enter. It is a bit less hilariously shameless, though, earning just 3 steadily blazing oil drums. There is one more, much raunchier harem out this summer that I'm obligated to mention here for the sake of thoroughness, but the mother of the goddess dormitory is really just another hentai that snuck its way onto TV somehow, and one where the protagonist happens to be 12. So I think that's about all I need to say about that forever. It gets 2 big yellow biohazard bins full of an unidentified ooze that will not burn no matter what we try, yet is also constantly emitting smoke. Last but not least, or should it be most, since we're talking about trash anime here? I guess it doesn't matter. I already touched on Battle Game in 5 Seconds of Meeting in my video on Big Dumb Battle Royales, focusing there mostly on the strategic potential of its power system, in particular the resident gamer Jesus-kun's ability to have whatever ability the other person thinks he has. I also talked about the ultra-edgy murder waifu backstory of Yuri, which, despite involving 2 different cases of child abuse and a psycho stalker, is actually pretty tame by this genre's standards. What I wasn't able to fit into that discussion is an in-depth look at the protagonist himself, Akira Shiro Yanagi, and that's a shame because he actually differs quite a bit from your typical death game hero, in that instead of being a meek nerd who frets about fighting before he's forced to toughen up, he's just a straight-up sociopath before the game even begins. He spends every minute that he's not playing online argument simulator fighting games, no really, that's the image the show chooses to open on, seething about real life and wishing it was more like a video game. And once he does get kidnapped or isekai'd or whatever happens to put them in the death game, he's substantially more excited to try out his new superpower than he is scared of dying. Though at least he tries, like, a little bit to avoid murdering anyone he doesn't have to. That said, he does also repeatedly threaten to murder his own teammates and potential allies, mostly just to see what'll happen, something that almost everyone around him just accepts as sensible and pragmatic, and it's further implied that he's intentionally manufacturing romance flags with the aforementioned murder waifu to emotionally manipulate her into being his ally. Oh, and the other leg of the anime's apparent love triangle, Ringo, just happens to be a fangirl of Akira's online pro gamer persona, Ki, not because of anything he, said to her, but because he was so awesome when he kicked her ass at a video game that she immediately caught feelings. The wish fulfillment vibes are about as strong here as the edge is sharp, which means there's barely any narrative tension to be found, and that is a bit of a problem for a survival game. But what it has to make up for that, and has in abundance, is a rotating rogues gallery of delightfully despicable monsters, each more cartoonishly evil than the last. From a psychotic red-headed femme fatale who exclusively fights in frilly lingerie, to a seemingly invincible bear of a man who believes the weak should serve the strong as slaves, to the death game's gleefully sadistic cat-girl master of ceremonies, Mion, this show's got a knack for concocting charismatic yet instantly hateable villains who make every predictable victory cathartic and entertaining at the very least. And at the end of the day, isn't that what big dumb battle royales are really all about? It gets 4 industrial waste bins full of illegal fireworks and rejected YA manuscripts from 2012 with a cigarette flying toward them in slow motion after being flicked away by a man in a trench coat so he could whip out a matching pair of Beretta 92s. And with that, we've come to the end of today's Refuse review. I hope it was entertaining as it was enlightening. I tried to make this one a little shorter than Winter's video and cover more shows in that time, so let me know in the comments below which format you prefer and why. And while you're down there, don't forget to click those like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, as well as that link to download Konosuba Fantastic Days. I'm Geoff Thew, certified trash sommelier, signing out from the anime landfill.